Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, it's the last day of the campaign trail before Wednesday's local elections. The poll results should tell us what the public thinks about President Park's response to last month's ferry disaster. South Korea and the US agree that Pyongyang must not advance its nuclear capability if it wants dialogue. Plus, Samsung Everland, the de facto holding company of Samsung Group, is seeking an initial public offering early next year. The move is designed to accelerate the transfer of control from the group's chairman to his children. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Tuesday, June 3rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eojin Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime: in just 18 hours from now, some 13,000 polling booths nationwide will open for citizens to cast their votes in the June 4th local elections. Analysts say the results will tell us what the nation thinks of the Park Geun-hye administration and the government's handling of last month's Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Our Park Ji-won has more.
The country's rival political parties are engaged in one final push to win the hearts of undecided voters on this Tuesday, the last day of the 13-day campaigning period. These elections are increasingly being seen as a vote of confidence for the Park Geun-hye administration, with last month's tragic ferry disaster hitting the incumbent government hard. The ruling Saenuri Party is calling on the public to give them one more chance to revamp and reform the government in the wake of the disaster.
I earnestly plead with voters to give us strength and another chance so President Park could make a new Korea. Our party, by helping the president, will build a new Korea.
The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is calling on voters to hold the ruling party responsible for the government's poor handling of the tragedy.
The Saenuri Party is already asking us to forget about the Sewol-ho ferry. They ask voters to forget about it and wipe the tears of the president by helping her. We'll never forget the Sewol-ho ferry disaster.
Over 13,000 polling stations around the nation will open at 6 a.m. on Wednesday and close at 6 p.m. More than 11% of eligible voters already cast their ballots in early voting held late last week. Experts say while the young and old vote will be split down their traditional party lines, with younger people supporting the opposition party and the older generation voting for the conservative ruling party, it's voters in their 40s who hold the key to deciding the victor in this year's local elections. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The chatter over resumption of the six-party talks on North Korea's nuclear program has picked up in recent weeks. But the chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and the United States during their talks in Washington agreed that dialogue with Pyongyang will only begin once the regime shows it's ready to freeze its nuclear program. Our correspondent Hwang Seung-hee reports.
South Korea and the United States agreed North Korea must not advance its nuclear capability if it seeks dialogue with them. Following 4 hours of talks in Washington on Monday local time, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk and his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies set a condition for the resumption of six-nation talks aimed at denuclearizing North Korea.
On resuming denuclearization talks, we agreed it must be a meaningful dialogue that ensures actual progress and prevents further development of North Korea's nuclear capacity.
The meeting comes a week after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Seoul, where he called for a swift resumption of the six-party talks. The multilateral denuclearization dialogue involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, has been stalled since December 2008. Hwang said Seoul and Washington agreed North Korea's sincerity about denuclearization is the key precondition to resuming the six-party talks, and they will seek close consultation with Beijing on the issue. South Korea and the United States also called on Japan to maintain transparency in its discussions with North Korea. Pyongyang agreed last week to allow a reinvestigation into the fate of Japanese citizens abducted by the North in the 1970s and 80s, and Tokyo promised to lift some of its sanctions on the North. Experts say dialogue between North Korea and Japan is key for solving the abduction issue, but stress Tokyo must not stray away from its trilateral cooperation with Seoul and Washington in dealing with Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
A former U.S. official says sanctions slapped on North Korea for its nuclear and missile activities don't really have the desired effect. Speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies on Monday, former U.S. National Security Advisor Tom Donilon said North Korea's isolated financial system means U.S. dollar sanctions don't do that much damage to the reclusive regime. He contrasted the situation in North Korea to Iran, which has a financial system that is closely interconnected internationally and also has a huge petroleum trade system.
A former senior U.S. State Department official has endorsed Tokyo's push to exercise collective self-defense, citing growing security threats posed by China and North Korea in the Asia-Pacific region. Meeting with Japanese officials and the ruling coalition in Tokyo, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia Kurt Campbell said Washington believes individual self-defense and police authority are not enough to handle new forms of threat in the region. The right to collective self-defense allows a country to take military action if an ally is attacked. Campbell stressed the U.S. needs to boost defensive ties with its two major allies, South Korea and Japan, whose bilateral relations remain strained over Tokyo's historic denials. Now, the top commander for U.S. forces in Korea has asked Washington to deploy an advanced American missile defense system in Korea. Speaking at a lecture in Seoul on Tuesday, General Curtis Scaparotti said he recommended that the Pentagon sends the system known as the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to the Korean Peninsula, to South Korea. Earlier media reports said that Washington had conducted a site survey for possible deployment locations for its THAAD system, which is designed to intercept a diverse range of missiles. Scaparotti said that the recommendation is in the initial stages of consideration and a final decision will come after close discussions between the two nations. Now, to the latest follow-up measure to last month's ferry disaster. More than 12 maritime police agencies across Korea will soon be referred to as maritime safety agencies under new restructuring plans. 4 others will become local maritime safety headquarters. The Ministry of Security and Public Administration says the Coast Guard's investigation and information duties will be taken over by the National Police Agency, and the National Safety Office will be in charge of surveillance, safety and pollution prevention. President Park Geun-hye announced the dissolution of the Coast Guard 3 weeks ago due to the agency's very heavily criticised response to the ferry sinking.
And in other news, Korea's biggest conglomerate is taking another step toward restructuring, and this one is being seen as a move to speed up the group's succession process. Samsung Everland, which has business interests in areas that include fashion and resorts, will seek an initial public offering in the first quarter of next year. Arirang News' Hwang Jie tells us why the listing could be very significant.
Samsung Everland will go public by the first quarter of next year. The de facto holding company of Korea's biggest conglomerate, Samsung Group, said Tuesday that it aims to become a global fashion and service company by seeking an initial public offering. The move, however, is widely seen by analysts as the next step in the conglomerate's succession plan as it relates to Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Geun-hye's 3 children. Questions remain about Samsung's future, with concerns lingering about the health of Lee, who is still hospitalized after suffering a heart attack last month. Currently, his son Tae-yong holds the largest 25% stake in Samsung Everland, while his 2 daughters, Boo-jin and Seoyeon, each hold around an 8.5% stake. Chairman Lee holds a mere 3.7%. Some say the listing of Samsung Everland is expected to generate cash for the three children's stake purchases so they can strengthen the group's control over 70 affiliates and pay for other costs like inheritance taxes. Many predict that the electronics and financial sector will be handed over to Lee's only son Tae-yong, the chemical and hotel sectors to first daughter Boo-jin, and the fashion and media sectors to second daughters Heo-hyun. But they add nothing is for certain when it comes to which affiliate goes to whom, especially regarding the construction sector. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Korea's consumer inflation grew at its fastest rate in over a year and a half in May. Statistics Korea says the consumer price index spiked 1.7% from a year earlier, and officials attribute the rise to a low base effect, saying agricultural products saw a steep decline in the same month last year. The price index, excluding items that are vulnerable to external uncertainties, such as agricultural and petroleum products, rose 2.2% on year, still below the central bank's target inflation rate of 2.5% and 3.5%. Prices of electricity and water jumped more than 4% on year, while agricultural and fisheries product prices edged down 2%. The Korean economy is heavily reliant on exports for growth, and the country has been on a good run in recent years. The economic slowdown in China is a worry, however, and it has the Korean government scrambling to come up with measures to boost shipments to its biggest trading partner. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Korean exports to China plunged 9.4% in May on year due to an economic slowdown in the world's second largest economy. Exports to China accounted for a quarter of Korea's total exports last month, mainly in the form of intermediate trade, which pertains to the procurement of raw materials or half-finished products that are then reprocessed in China and then exported to other countries. However, China is increasingly focusing more on importing goods that boost its domestic consumption. The proportion of intermediate trade in China's overall imports has reflected the shift. It dropped to 25% last year, down 14 percentage points from just 6 years earlier. To help Korea's export companies respond to the changing landscape, Korea's Trade Ministry is planning to step in. They plan to promote more marketing and export exhibitions through related organizations like the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency. Securing a bilateral free trade agreement between Korea and China would also help the Korean industry better tap into China's local market. A Korean trade official said the FTA would likely shorten the time it would take for Korean cosmetics and health-related products to go through Chinese customs, which can currently take up to 4 years. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korean tech giant LG Electronics and 3 of its affiliates have taken 12 airline companies to court over alleged price fixing. Legal analysts say the court's decision could open the door for similar lawsuits down the line. Shin Se-min reports.
LG Group companies are seeking hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensation from a dozen domestic and foreign airline companies. The Fair Trade Commission said Tuesday that LG Electronics, LG Chem, and 2 of their affiliates filed a lawsuit against the airline companies late last year, and the case is currently being heard by the Seoul Central District Court. The 12 airline operators, including Korean Air, Asiana Airlines, Air France, and Cathay Pacific, are accused of colluding to maintain unfairly high freight transportation prices by fixing surcharges levied to make up for volatile fuel costs. The LG companies claim that the move hurt their competitiveness in export markets. The lawsuit seeks over $390,000 in financial damages, but experts say the amount of compensation may rise much higher depending on the amount of losses. If the airline companies are found guilty, many other exporters could bring about similar suits. Korea's Supreme Court recently ruled that penalties were rightly imposed on airline companies that collude to fix airfares. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
On to some huge tech news now, and Apple has unveiled a new mobile operating system for its iPhone and iPad, calling it the company's biggest release since the launch of its App Store. iOS 8 was showcased at Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference in San Francisco on Monday. Some of its features include the ability to control iPhones from other Apple devices and something called Health Kit, which is a function in which data on a user's health conditions are recorded onto the device. Apple says the iOS 8 will be available sometime in the fall, along with Yosemite, a new operating system for its Mac computers. Staying in the US, and the Obama administration has announced a very ambitious plan to significantly reduce carbon emissions in the US plant sector. Supporters of the plan say it will give Washington greater leverage to push countries like China and India to do more to fight climate change and bring down their emissions as well. Our Chae-Yuson reports.
But today EPA is proposing a clean power plan that will cut carbon pollution from our power sector by using clean energy sources and cutting energy waste.
The Obama administration's new plan requires America's 1,000 power plants to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions to 30% of 2005 levels by the year 2030. Nearly 2/5 of electricity in the U.S. is generated by coal-fueled plants. Each U.S. state has a number of ways to achieve this. They can increase their power plants' heat rates, rely more on natural gas or other sources for energy, and raise energy efficiency. The Environmental Protection Agency says more than $90 billion of climate and health-related costs will be saved from the plan, and up to 150,000 asthma attacks in children and over 3,000 heart attacks could be prevented.
Often these illnesses are aggravated by air pollution. Pollution from the same sources that release carbon and contribute to climate change. We've got to do more to reduce it.
Despite the government's assurances that the new rules will bring down electricity bills by 8% and encourage investment in new technologies, business groups and lawmakers from coal-reliant states oppose the initiative.
The administration has set out to kill coal and its 800,000 jobs. If it succeeds in death by regulation, we'll all be paying a lot more money for electricity.
After a period of public comment, the regulations will be finalized in June of next year, after which states can submit their own carbon reduction plans. Chae-Yuson, Arirang News.
Okay, well, it's time now for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Eunice, Nigerian police are now banning protests in the capital city of Abuja.
That's right, Junju. The Nigerian commissioner explained the protest ban as necessary to respond to the, quote, serious security threat posed to people around the demonstration sites in Abuja. In a statement recently released, he said he could no longer fold his hands and watch the lawlessness. The group Bring Back Our Girls had been holding rallies in the capital city, calling on the government to locate and rescue the kidnapped Chibok schoolgirls, those missing still numbering at more than 250 days after their abduction. A lawyer for Bring Back Our Girls, which had also sparked a global Twitter campaign by the same name, said the decision to ban protests was insane and illegal, adding that the group would challenge the move in court. A powerful sandstorm quickly shifted from irritating to deadly as it wreaked havoc in Tehran. Enormous dust clouds engulfed Iran's capital city as a wall of sand and tossed debris reduced visibility, triggering traffic accidents and cutting power. State-run IRNA news agency reported at least 4 people were killed and 30 others injured. Some domestic flights were diverted as well. Winds riling up to 110 kilometers per hour were recorded as residents told of darkness descending upon the city. And violence continues to flare up in eastern Ukraine, where hundreds of pro-Moscow separatists tried to overrun a Ukrainian border guard, triggering an exchange of fire for hours. It happened in the region of Luhansk, where military personnel were flown in to assist in staving off the assault. Ukraine's border service said at least 5 militants were killed and 8 others wounded, while 7 border guards were hurt from sniper fire. Meanwhile, leaders of Western governments, including those from the U.S., Britain, and France, are set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin this coming Friday. The occasion to mark the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings is expected to be overshadowed by discussions on how to defuse tensions within Ukraine. And finally, 4 days remain before your opportunity to power lunch with the Oracle of Omaha expires, at least for the year. Bidding opened on Sunday U.S. time for a face-to-face with legendary investor Warren Buffett, who has taken part in the namesake fundraiser for the Glide Foundation since the year 2000. The bid opened at $25,000 and has so far surpassed the $355,000 mark. Last year, the winning bidder shelled out $1 million for the honor. The winner will dine on steak in New York City with the Berkshire Hathaway CEO, with the option of bringing along up to 7 friends. Bidding ends Friday evening Eastern Standard Time.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Brazil has had more than 6 years to prepare for next month's World Cup, but with 10 days left before the global events kicks off, the nation is far from ready. A Brazilian daily reports that only half of the 167 infrastructure projects promised for the international event have been finished. That includes the Arena Corinthians in Sao Paulo, which will be the venue for the World Cup's opening match on June 12th. Safety setbacks, budget problems, and heavy rain have all been blamed for the lack of progress. However, Brazil's sports ministry is downplaying the reports of unfinished stadiums, saying the games won't be affected.
Not so long from now, you may be able to control your computers or smartphones with just your hands and fists. Local scientists have developed a new technology they believe could change the way we interact with our devices. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
By simply clenching your fist, then opening it again, you can control screens of computers or televisions. The selected screen moves when you clench your fist and move it up and down. When clenched, the watch is on. When released, it is off. This is what's known as wearable gesture technology, which works off the movement of wrist muscles. Researchers say the technology is more advanced than the current wearable devices on the market, and it allows users to answer phone calls and control volume with a simple clench of the fist.
Using infrared telecommunications, the technology senses the movement of the wrist muscle and converts the gesture into an order to control the contents.
When the user is wearing the watch, they can control and communicate with nearby smart devices. As the technology recognizes the movement of wrist muscles and does not depend on a camera, it can be used anywhere at any time. By adding authentication functions, researchers believe that users will eventually be able to open the doors to their cars or even their homes.
Because the technology recognizes the movement of the hand, we believe that it is the right technology to adopt in smartbands or in other smart devices being developed now.
The wearable tech market is expected to be worth some $500 million by 2018. The research team plans to gain an upper hand in the market by creating technology that can change formation and is easy to attach to or detach from the body. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Well, it's another cloudy day today with rain still falling on most areas of the nation. And depending on where you are, the rain could be heavy or light at the times. The southeast areas will receive the most rainfall of up to 80 millimeters, while the Seoul metro areas will get between 5 and 20 millimeters. And this band of rain is dragging down the temperatures. It will be cooler than yesterday with highs hovering in the low 20s across the most of the region, so dress accordingly. But temperatures will jump back to the warm side tomorrow to the upper 20s, but it will not be as hot as last week here in the capital under mostly to pearly cloudy skies. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in the capital will rise to 24. Daegu and Busan top out at 21, and Gwangju should climb to 23 later on. Now let's see how other regions are looking. Jeju should see a high of 25. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 23 and 22, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 13. Well, stay dry, everyone, and I'll be back with more updates tomorrow morning.
Well, those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.